They're a little early. First order of business to approve the minutes from April. Folks have a chance to look.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we'll move right into the fun part of the night with the fine arts presentation. So,
Great, so we've got some of the fine arts coordinators here to share a little bit about their programs, and I promised John Welch, who's our performance music coordinator, that he could go first because he has a concert tonight. It's the season for concerts, right?
Yeah, so first off, I want to say thank you all for having me. This is the first time I've done this, so not certain everything that I needed to present. So I just made a sheet for everybody, and also my computer is completely in use right now, as there's a senior baby picture and senior picture slideshow all connected in Oregon Bright Auditorium. So, and thank you all for letting me go first, and I'll probably be super brief with all of this, but I have just a handout for you folks. And so when Diane presented this to us, mentioned that just to kind of give an overview of really what's going on in our district, what we do here. And sometimes it's nice to articulate what exactly is happening with our ensembles, how many we have, and just kind of the structure of what we do here. So I kind of listed this, well, not kind of, I listed this from each of our 3 high schools, and then to our junior highs and our elementary theater programs to kind of show you what's happening in each of the different schools. And pardon me if I just kind of read what's in front of you, but you'll see the City High, 3 curricular bands, 4 curricular choirs, 2 curricular orchestras. We also have multiple jazz band, show choirs, chamber orchestra, and I neglected to put in here marching bands as well for each of the schools. Liberty High still growing some of these programs. They have a concert band, 4 curricular choirs, an orchestra, and they also have multiple jazz band, show choirs, chamber orchestra. Their chamber orchestra is actually a what we call an alternative string style structure that Annie Savage works with, but still kind of functions as their chamber orchestra. And then obviously marching band. And then at West High, we have 4 curricular bands, 5 curricular choirs, 2 curricular orchestras, and just as the others, chamber orchestra, jazz band, show choirs, and marching band. And the enrollment, I was trying to track down all the numbers that we could get for just how many students are enrolled, and I just kind of ran out of time with preparation for tonight as well. I do know that at West High, we are servicing nearly 50% of the student body with the music department. And it's similar at each of the schools. At our junior highs, we have very similar ensembles, and with that, for each band, orchestra, and choir, you're going to find that there's a 7th grade band, 7th grade orchestra and choir, similar with 8th grade as well. And each of those also have extracurricular groups that meet outside the day, so that'd be jazz band, show choir, chamber orchestra. And then our elementary band and orchestra programs, currently we are doing 5th and 6th grade beginning lessons for students during the day, and that's for orchestra and for band as well. So the structure of that is teachers come in and meet with students for lessons, and then their larger ensemble happens once a week outside the school day, and that's hosted at a variety of different places. Mostly depending on the proximity of the school, depending on the proximity of one of the high schools or junior highs, as they're able to hold some of those ensembles because they can be quite large. And so for all of these, our instructors for instrumental music do have also AP music. We do have some general music courses such as Hear My Voice that's happening at City High, in which some of our performance folks are helping out a little bit there. And that's an attempt to reach out to some of our underserved populations, and has been a wonderful model for how we can reach all of our students, and we're hoping to continue building on from there. So overall, we have about 34 staff members, and we were trying to figure this out with the music auxiliary, and we broke it down, and just a rough estimate is somewhere near 3,000 students, we believe, that are being or receiving the music or services from performance music staff, and that would be from grades 5 through 12. And again, 34 staff members that are covering all those students. And we've had a lot of accomplishments, and this isn't all, but just kind of a highlight list. Very excited about the top 3 that you see there are some of the highest honors that we can offer in the state. we had 3 ensembles from our from 8th grade on to high school that were selected to perform a couple weeks ago at the Iowa Bandmasters Association. So that would have been City High's concert band, their City High's jazz band, as well as Northwest Junior High, their jazz band as well. And there are a few other honors here. We constantly have students that are getting accepted to play in the honor orchestras and honor bands and honor choirs that are happening at all the Regent universities, as well as some of the smaller colleges. And there's just a whole lot there that it's a little bit tough to document. And along with that, I can speak for West High that my ensemble, I'll go ahead and just proudly say this, last year, we were accepted to play and perform at the American String Teacher Association National Orchestra Festival. And my colleague David Haas was accepted last year to perform at the American Choral Directors Association. And those are 2 of the highest honors that you can receive. So our ensembles are performing at very high levels at the state and at the national level. And we're just very excited for everything that we had here. Also, constantly having students that are going into the Iowa Junior Honor Orchestra Festival, and the Opus Festival, both of which are hosted at All-State. So those are middle school ensembles that, again, are hosted in along with the All-State Festival, which is really for high schoolers. And that's one of the top honors that we have in the state. And then very proud to say, I don't know how many years in a row this is, but we had 74 students across the district accepted into the All-State ensembles, and super proud to say that that's the most of any school district in the state. So a lot of great things that are going on here, and that's pretty much an overview that I had prepared for you. So I don't know if you have any questions. Or...
Yeah. Any questions for John before I end?
Quick question.
Yes.
Do you keep track of how many students receive music scholarships to go on to continue their education at a secondary school or post-secondary school?
We do not as a district, but that's something that we most certainly can do. Again, this is my first year kind of learning the ropes, and there are a few things that I would like to start to track to see what we're doing. I know tonight that I have 2 students that are going to be playing at the University of Iowa next year that are doing solos and things of that nature, but we do have a number of students that go on and receive a lot of money for, and oftentimes they're non-majors that are playing in smaller liberal, liberal arts colleges and things of that nature. So these lifelong skills, we do get to see an immediate impact in just how they can come back to the students and help them financially.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the marching bands, do they all do formations and compete that way, or?
So there's each, it's a good question, and it kind of, to break down what happens in each high school, we try to provide the, very similar experiences everywhere you go, but you'll find that you're dealing with different directors, different philosophies, and some folks are more into competitive marching bands, some are not. All of them have a marching band that, is going to be I guess it's not an extracurricular ensemble, but curricular ensembles that meet and then perform at like the University of Iowa Homecoming Parade. That's one where all 3 of them go. But there are some, I know that City High competes a little bit more than West High does. And I'm not certain about what Liberty does. I wish I could speak a little bit more to that. But all of them, are represented at each football game, at least the home ones, and things of that nature. Yeah.
Well, at the University of Iowa, besides Dance Marathon, the Hawkeye Marching Band is the largest student organization.
Yeah.
And I just know students that have gone to City High have a much easier time getting into that than the ones that haven't been in that competitive marching arena, and it's very beneficial.
Sure.
That way. So that's something I would encourage, that they all have competitive marching.
Okay. Yeah, and I can certainly bring that up to the band directors. Absolutely.
Before you go, can you just touch on the Hear My Voice program?
Yeah, the Hear My Voice, Sarah could probably do a little bit more with this. It's I might even turn it over to you because you've had more to answer.
So it was an idea that John Bacon had, and he approached one of the teachers that was working with students who had special needs at City High to see if she would be interested in teaching this course. And students are able to come into the course, and as a group or individually, they work on songs of their choosing. So there's a lot of choice in that course. But the music tends to be a little bit more open-ended. So it might be pop music, it might be jazz, it might be country blues. And they work on individual projects together along with her. And then sometimes the choral directors come in and help as well. I believe that they did a joint concert recently with the choirs at City High in addition to the Hear My Voice course. The nice thing about the course is that they've included students in it that have special needs, so it's very inclusive, and it is trying to get students who are maybe not served by the regular choirs, who haven't had that experience all along, but still enjoy and love music.
Yeah, it's, and I know that Matt, we've talked about this before in our curriculum meetings. You probably don't remember this, but we brought this up one time. And this is something I was trying to articulate. You know, our performing ensembles are wonderful in that we provide a lot to our students from grades 5 through 12. But we do have a segment of our population that is that might not move here, you know, before the 5th grade, or might move from a school district that doesn't have these same offerings, or it might just be from a different country, to which, you know, this is, you know, not part of what they've experienced in the past. But this is a wonderful sort of general music option to help reach those students, and is a wonderful supplemental thing. It's happening at City High and Liberty right now. It's not at West, and we've kind of, you know, looked into some of the successes of these programs, and, you know, perhaps it's something that can be applied in the future, especially as we're doing curriculum for junior high in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, this came up at our comprehensive equity plan last night, just in general about what you just mentioned, that, you know, if you've been taking violin since you're 3 years old, it pushes out some of those kids who just don't have, you know, maybe they're starting in the 9th grade. And I think the more we have, you know, expand our music to kind of non-traditional kids who aren't, haven't had that opportunity through general music here.
Thanks, John. We'll let
Thank you all so much.
Good
Sorry
luck
to be
with your
rude and
concert
run,
tonight.
but
I gotta go back down to the later.
yeah.
Keep it moving.
7:30 at Arden Bright Auditorium, so don't there.
You probably have to come early to get a seat, right? Then we'll move to Sarah Fairfield. She is our music coordinator for the general music program. John does performance and Sarah does general.
Thank you. Well, thanks for inviting us today to talk about our programs. This is very exciting. So all students in the ICCSD from grades kindergarten through 7th grade right now receive general music. And in kindergarten through 4th grade, they have it 3 times a week for 27 minutes, which is about 81 minutes a week. That's pretty good. That's only 9 minutes shy of what the National Association for Music Education recommends for that age. In 5th and 6th grade, it goes down to twice a week, but of course they have the option then of taking performance music courses. So we understand why that happens at that point. In 7th grade then, they can take a trimester of general music if they're not already in band, choir, or orchestra that is required for them. And I believe there's also an elective at 8th grade, although I'm not sure to what degree it's offered at each of the 3 junior highs, but I know at Southeast there is an 8th grade option there. So I think overall we're doing pretty well in terms of the amount of content time that we have with students, and that's pretty exciting. Last summer, we revised the general music curriculum to better reflect the district goals and the state objectives for elementary music, as well as the national standards. And as a result, we developed this mission statement: to nurture musical children through culture, community building, sensory motor experiences, social emotional learning, and the development of cognition. And so all of our curricular areas kind of focus on one of those 4 areas as we work with kiddos. We're really fortunate in the district to have a variety of resources, really lucky. So each music teacher has a full instrumentarium. They'll have a variety of xylophones, recorders, unpitched percussion. And in addition to those regular classroom instruments, each year, each teacher has the option to have a traveling keyboard kit. If you grew up in Iowa City, you might have played that same keyboard kit. And it's still working today. It's actually pretty cool. We also have the World Music Drums, and I'd say about 80% of our staff has taken a summer course of at least a week, if not more, to be trained on how to utilize the World Music Drumming kit, and there's a full curriculum that goes along with that. Some of the schools actually have their own kit, and so they're able to have the drums available to them the entire year. In addition to those kits, we can also check out kits from district media. So we have a variety of locations and cultures from around the world that are represented, including China, Japan, Mexico, Australia, India, Appalachia, Hawaii, as well as some other specific to instruments like the theremin, which is a very unusual instrument, and it's kind of a cool kit to bring out for kids. In addition to our culture kits, we have a lot of special programs that we host on a regular basis. Music in the Schools, which of course comes to us through Any Given Child and the Foundation, and this provides performances for students in grades 1 through 3, and it introduces them to the instruments of the orchestra. We have the Symphony the Symphony Goes to School, which sends 4th graders to a live orchestral concert, and now it's going to Foxman, which has been very successful, and I'm sure Regina will talk more about that. We also host Opera Iowa once every 4 years. They come to each building and set up and perform a live opera right in the building, which is pretty exciting. They also host workshops for the kids to learn a little bit more about the art form of opera. This fall we're having Dancing Drum, and Dancing Drum is a really unique experience because the kids become the performers. So instead of bringing artists, they just bring drums, and the kids become the artists. We've gotten great feedback on this particular group, so we're excited to host that. In addition to the regular assemblies during the day, we're going to have some at night that are to allow parents to come and be engaged in that experience with their children as well. And then finally, 2 years ago, we started Kids Sing, which is a festival for kids who just love to sing. It's not an honor choir because we feel it's important at this age not to really exclude kids, but to give them the opportunity to do something that they love. And so this is a great choral festival. Regina's been a huge help in putting this together, as well as Susan Brennan at the foundation in terms of helping us fund that experience. And we've had great feedback. I'm sure you've seen on the website the pictures of the kids holding their scores. Those are our Kids Sing kits. So all of these programs support our curricular goals, and when we have these special programs come in, the general music teachers work really hard to make connections between those special programs and to keep those connections alive throughout the school year. And then one final note that I wanted to kind of talk to you about is I just wanted to acknowledge the amazing work that my general music colleagues are doing on a regular basis. A typical student load for general music teachers is 450 students. And in addition to that teaching load, many of those teachers do after-school ORF clubs and after-school performances, and those are all done without any kind of extra service contracts. They're just doing it because they enjoy kids and they love doing it for them. Many of my colleagues belong to professional organizations, and last year alone, 5 of our staff members went out to present at state and national conferences. So we have just an amazing group of teachers that are working with our kids every day. Questions about the general music program?
One comment, one question. So my daughter's been in the ORF club, so I've been able to go to those concerts, except for probably tonight's concert.
That's right.
But that's been really fun to see the kids, how they pick up music that way. It's a totally different way to learn music. My question is, at the junior high level, if you could wipe the slate clean and start again, would it be would you think the same course, general music, would be the one that we would go with, or do you think there's something else out there that's better?
That's a great question. In terms of music, are you talking about?
Well, just like, as an option for kids, if it's either choir or general music, is there something better to choose?
Is there something better to choose? That's tough because the performance ensembles, I think, really speak to kids who have a lot of experience already. And of course, we've talked about there are some kids that have barriers to being able to get that experience. General music, you can come in with little to no experience and be a music maker right away. So it serves sort of a different level, but I think part of the reason our performance music ensembles are so great in this district is because the general music sets them up for those experiences. I know I grew up in California, and in our state we did not have general music, and I had a high school of 3,000 and our band had 30. So you can see how that lack of general music. So I'm not sure you could choose one over the other, and I think it might be specific to the child and the experiences that they've had. I think kids who have not had as much experience might not feel as welcome in a high-level performance ensemble, but should hopefully feel very welcome in a junior music class. There are some things at the junior high level that I think we could look into doing. I think continuing the world music drumming would be really effective at that level because it's really appealing, but having had those general music experiences could lead them into more a deeper experience later at the junior high level. I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
Yeah, I mean, just having worked with a lot of junior high kids for basketball and some other things, there's definitely an appreciation for music there, but there's maybe not
the general music piece.
Yeah, or the choir piece,
yeah.
you know what I'm
I
saying? Like,
know
they
what you
like
mean.
music, but they want to be engaged in something.
They want
that's
to be
just-
engaged in something else. Of course, technology, music production, these sorts of things offer new experiences that might be more appropriate for their developmental level.
What about, and again, we don't have all the money in the world, we can't do everything, but I always felt we were sort of missing general music at the high school level.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of, it's in junior high, and then if you're not in band or choir, there's really no music in your scholastic life necessarily.
Right. I think that Hear My Voice class was sort of starting some of that, but I think there are opportunities for other types of ensembles, non-traditional ensembles. In some schools, it might not be appropriate in our community, but in some schools I've seen mariachi bands, ukulele clubs, jazz clubs, world music, gamelan. I think it might depend on the interests of and backgrounds of the students in those schools. So we kind of talked about this in the secondary meeting, surveying our students
And seeing
to see what they want, because maybe we as adults are kind of missing the boat.
And I love band. I played the saxophone, you know, all through high school, and I never played anymore, but I play the guitar all the time.
Yeah.
And so some of these things, you know, it's pretty hard, like, to sit around your house and play your saxophone by yourself. It isn't. I mean, maybe sometimes it's fulfilling, but you know,
Absolutely.
you know, just somebody's like,
a picture out of my head.
I'll break it. It's a tenor.
Kenny G, that's what I meant.
It's a tenor. But you know, just kind of thinking about that, like we're giving these kids lifelong skills for those kids who aren't, you know, a lot. What are they interested in? Ukuleles are pretty small.
They're pretty inexpensive.
And pretty inexpensive.
And composition, getting kids to compose
Yes.
is also
Right.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's, and not even necessarily composition, like just sheet music, but like lyrical is kind of where my mind was going when I was
Yeah,
asking about.
songwriting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These are great ideas.
And this is not music, but it's kind of in the fine arts realm. My daughter is a poet and has been to Des Moines, and she's kind of surprised that the lack of the sort of spoken word community in Iowa City for all of the UNESCO City of Literature. She went to Des Moines and she's like, I'm blown away by these high school kids who are doing some great, and then that also feeds into state and national, all kinds of stuff.
Interesting.
I think that's something that we probably have the resources for in the community as far as a lot, despite our wonderful teachers, but even bringing in workshop folks or IYWP or whomever to help
When we
facilitate.
visited Central Campus, more CT focused, but one of their academies they had there was a urban arts
I
academy.
think that's who she
And so
saw.
yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
that's, and we had plans to take a team over, we never really got that far, and like you said, it's probably a resource issue for us, but on some level, you know, we definitely saw the relevance and, you know,
Right.
would love to start something like that, so
Yeah, 'cause
something
I
to
know there's
continue
just
to pursue.
Some of that happening in the community, because even at the,
Yeah.
you know, at the college level, where there's a little bit, but it's not.
The University of Iowa just recently hired someone that specializes in that.
Yeah.
So,
Really?
So,
Wow. Interesting. That's a great idea.
thank you.
Love it. Thank you.
All right, then moving on to visual arts. We've got Jenny Saylor here and Christian Armstead, who are co-art coordinators. So
Hide in the back row.
Christian's handing it off to Jenny.
All right. We also would like to thank you for inviting us. It's really nice to be able to come and share a little bit about our program. We had prepared a show at Liberty, thinking that we were going to be there, and so I thought I would bring it to you guys. So I would love it if you would spin around and just while I'm talking, just sort of check out the artwork. The work that's up there is a combination of digital, analog, meaning hand-done, and also some 3D work. And most of it is from our AP kids, not all of it. And it's kind of nice to just have a chance to show it off a little bit. We have 24 teachers in the Iowa City School District. 13 of those teachers are elementary art teachers. And elementary art teachers provide the foundation of our visual arts program. They're amazing teachers. They're working with students from all walks of life, helping them to create and analyze and collaborate and find their voice. Elementary art teachers meet with students once a week for 54 minutes. Then when students go on to the junior high, at that level, almost all 7th graders take art, and obviously they see them every day for a trimester at that level. At that level, they continue to work sort of like what you're seeing up here. It's a combination of 2D and 3D work in a variety of media. If students have room in their schedule, they can go ahead and elect to take studio art in the 8th grade if they want to. At the high school level, we offer 13 to 14 different elective classes. And I say 13 to 14 because there's a little bit of difference between the various high schools, minor, but little bits. They can choose from traditional classes like drawing, painting, ceramics. They can go to more specialized things like metalworking and stained glass. And then we also have the technology-driven courses like digital photography and video and graphic design, advanced graphic design. One of the areas that we're pretty excited about in terms of growth at the senior high level is the AP program. And the EOS initiative was a big deal for us. That's the Equal Opportunity Schools. Because kids who never thought that they could take an AP class or never thought of themselves that way, we encouraged them to get in there, and then also we were able to help them actually pay for the portfolio to take it, and that was huge. I know for a fact at Liberty that at least a third of my kids would not have done it if it hadn't been for that, which was pretty important. The work they produce at the AP level is unbelievable in its rigor. We create more equitable opportunities, earning college credit, being in a classroom with high expectations and a common goal. We promote and build our art programs so that the kids learn to believe in themselves and believe that they can actually become an AP student and find that there are actually many careers that they can go out and actually use this. Our program is definitely not just about AP. At all grade levels, our students draw, they paint, they create with clay, they master digital imagery and graphic design, they hone their spatial skills, they use their mallets and metal and torches in their metalworking class. At every grade level, our students come from all walks of life and abilities. We have students from our modified classrooms that come in and are incredibly successful in our rooms. And we have students who go on to a 1 or 2 year training school, but then we also have kids who go on to, a special art school like RISD, which is the Rhode Island School of Design, or MCAD or MIAD. In the Iowa City School District, our teachers put up 5 district shows a year. Midwest One hosts one every year for the elementary kids, and then UICCU and the US Bank host one for the secondary schools. And then the Hancher Show is back now. It's in its 3rd year since reconvening after the 2008 flood. And so that now is a K through 12 exhibit, which is actually pretty cool to see all the work from all the grade levels in one spot. And then, of course, we do the K through 12 one here at the ESC, which is kind of on a smaller scale, but, And then finally, and I think most importantly, our art classrooms are really an embodiment of the 21st century skills-based classrooms. Our students work together in a student-centered environment. They're talking all the time, they're analyzing, they're critiquing, and they're helping each other try to sort of problem solve and figure out, okay, how do I get to a finished place with this work and what's it missing, and just all those sorts of questions. So that's what I've got.
I will say that I went to the 3rd trimester art show at City High today, and it was neat to see the whole range of art from, the beginning artist up to Kate Goodvin's big, huge painting that she had.
Oh, yeah, the one that won Best of Show at the,
No, it's not even at the Honey one, it's a different one.
Oh.
Yeah, it's bigger.
Gosh, I should have gone.
But in arts, I guess, what are we missing, or what could we do better, or like facility-wise, or if you just had.
We're working facility-wise. At Liberty, obviously, I've got a great facility. And so I think we're working right now on upgrading the facilities at both City High and at West to try to make them better, just facility-wise. So I think that that's a good thing. What are we missing beyond that? I don't know. I wish more kids came in there. I wish the big picture is that there's just so much competition. They were saying that they thought maybe they got half the kids in. I'd be surprised if a quarter of the kids take art. And I think that's a shame. So, yeah. Christian, anything else we're missing?
I think at the elementary level, we do have some inequities among budgets sometimes. And that's been a big discussion. And it's not, it's just, I think it's just been an issue with, the principals manage that money and manage it differently. And, they have needs in other places, but sometimes I think that's if we're talking about concern with staff and need, that's probably the biggest one we hear most of the time.
Yeah, there are some huge differences between schools in terms of per pupil funding, that's true.
You were saying at the secondary level that you're doing metalworking and that, what type, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we're doing, so for the actual soldering, we're doing silver soldering. So we're using brass and copper, nickel silver, sterling silver, and we're doing silver soldering. And then the kids learn how to do cold joins, they learn how to use jeweler saws and drills and all of that to actually try to, put together the pieces that they're making. So that's.
So is it jewelry, it's mainly jewelry, or are you
Jewelry,
doing
small
larger
sculpture,
scale?
small
Okay.
sculpture, because silver soldering, we're using an acetylene torch, a B tank acetylene torch, and so we don't have the capacity to go really big. So if we wanted to make furniture, for example, that setup that we've got would not do it.
You've got a whole bunch of welders sitting in the warehouse at Hy-Vee that need to be used. And there's ARC, there's MIG, there's oxyacetylene setups. We've got to get the facilities, and if we get them in our schools through art, that's how we get it done. But if we've got an art class, an art sculpture class that teaches welding, and then we can have a legitimate welding course. If that's how we get it in our district, we have to get it because it's a skill and it's a discipline that we need to have it available to all kids. Brian Martz, who is the industrial arts teacher at West High, was always talking about having a girls-only welding course. And he said if you do that, the boys will want to take it because.
And I've heard women welders are in high demand.
Yeah.
So.
And I've told the story more than once about when I took welding at West Branch through FFA or through Ag Education. The girls were the best oxyacetylene welders because the instructor said it was, you do it like you're toweling your back. You have your filler metal and your torch opposing each other. And I don't know if, and I guess at the time, I don't remember if that's how I toweled my back or if I even dried it. And that's maybe why the guys in the class had trouble. But no, it's something we need to have facilities for it. It should be promoted and worked with it. And it should be more than just silver soldering. We have equipment, we have it, there's a demand for it, not only in the art field, but in industry as well.
I think the new remodel of West High and our new industrial tech teacher there with us, we've always shared a space, and so now we have a new metals and jewelry studio, and they're going to work on that industrial space as well, and I know that his plan is to incorporate welding, and actually this year he's got all of his welding equipment set up and made some modifications with how we use the space, and so I think that's in the works definitely at West High.
Well, we have to make sure it's at all schools.
I'm
How
willing
much
to learn to weld.
do the art departments do with set design at the schools?
They haven't a ton in the past, but.
Set design at all the schools is extracurricular.
Okay.
And actually this year I just became the technical director at West High. I've never ever done any of it. You actually get a large group of kids who I've never seen. So I didn't see them in the art classroom. You get a whole different population of kids who have never touched power tools. Kids, like if anybody saw Miracle on 34th Street and saw our sleigh, that was built entirely by kids who had never ever touched a power tool. And it was, pretty complex. They had to use the jigsaw, and so from a set design standpoint, we don't have a component in the art program. We do have, I will have kids next year who have interest in set design at college level. And so they're working on an AP portfolio. So basically just working on drawings and some organization that way. So we try to work it back in that way.
Because, I'm thinking, if not enough kids are taking art, and it is competition, and obviously we can't do everything, but are there ways, kind of like with Castle at City High, where they're taking language arts, social studies, and science, right?
Yeah.
Is there room for that in art, somewhere where it can be, whether it's industrial tech or a way that kind of incorporates, different curricular areas and bringing them together? Because obviously what we're doing here is great, and I was at the Hampshire show, which was very impressive, all around the board, and just thinking, different ways we can kind of engage more kids. Because I was, for a little minute, the set director at West High, and had those same kids, probably not nearly the skill. I know I didn't have the skill level. Anybody who came after me, but we did it, and that was a big part of it, was teaching them how to use power song, all that kind of stuff. For facilities, I will say, I took a look at Northwest Junior High's art room the other day, and boy, that can use some.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know who built that building. I mean, it's like there's a very strange.
Yeah.
When you designed school without windows, you got a problem.
Yeah.
But
And
we
then I
had
remember that
this
one.
morning to talk about the art room and other areas, and we're probably gonna add a new art room there instead of a classroom, and
Yeah.
then convert that.
Because that, my sense there, and this is a little off, but it was maybe not even needing more classrooms or whatever, but the design of the space is so inefficient in so many
Well,
places.
how about the L-shaped restroom?
Oh, the restrooms are these huge vestibules that go back to, you talk about fight areas, make out, like tons of problems without it.
Now the junior high.
What?
The junior high.
Yeah. So, but the art was a big thing, because it was very
Probably
clearly,
would.
I mean, they can't even fit the kiln in the door.
Yeah.
The conversation's going to,
Yeah.
that's gonna get rectified.
Great.
It's been in storage for a year and a half.
Yeah, I just heard this morning, so that'll get fixed.
They try.
I like the idea of the blending of the set design and the set construction, because those are different skills, and helping Liberty do their set, and not having a lot of kids do what they're doing. They could paint for the most part, but there's a lot of learning going on there, and so that's a nice piece. And I was going to say, as far as just general art interest, my younger son had never really shown a lot of interest in art at home. Like, he didn't draw a lot or do anything, but he did whatever he did through elementary school and into junior high, and somewhere someone, a teacher or another student, told him, hey, I like the stuff you're doing, it's good, right? And he's like, oh, then I should probably take another art class. I actually signed up for an elective art class, and then he signed up to do art club, and blew me away because he had never shown any interest, and it just took a person to say, hey, that stuff's good. And it's gotten better. I don't know that I would have said it was good early on.
Recorded.
I'm gonna take myself out of this hole. So there's art hanging on our walls now, as most parents have art from their kids hanging on the walls. But ours isn't really out of that sense of obligation. It actually looks good hanging on our walls. And so I'm pretty proud that we've been able to grow that way. But just that voice of encouragement was, I think, an important piece that really did the choice.
One question, I know Christian at West, when I was still there, you really started to do a lot more digital stuff. And so where is that?
So we're still, we will get new computers because we do digital photography, we went digital there, and we have the graphic design program and the video productions. We've been able to get cameras for everybody. All three high schools have new cameras. I think the difficult thing with any of the digital programs that we offer currently, and I think we're kind of in a discussion modifying some of the curriculum, is that it used to be that what would bring kids into video production or into Photoshop was it wasn't something they had access to, and now they have access to everything. And so keeping up with things and the trend really is trying to figure out what can't they access and what do we need to make sure that they want to use, and what the current trend of what's going on from an employment standpoint. And I think some things that we talked about is doing more animation, and we can use Photoshop to do that when we have the tools to use it. So basically, we just need a little more education from some of our staff, basically. It's really complex and hard to keep up with, but that's kind of the direction from a curricular standpoint. So we're making those little bit of modifications, but computer program-wise, I think we have what we need, and they've made some adjustments. It was a rough couple of years with some of the, what's that called? Is it Citrix? Is that?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. The Citrix thing, we were all super excited because we thought that kids were going to have Photoshop at their hands, and Adobe, and like all that whole Adobe suite, really. And last year they had it sporadically enough that we had to stop making assignments using it. And then we finally found out at the beginning of this year that the licensing wasn't correct, and that technically the kids shouldn't have been able to access it. And so it was sort of lucky that we were even able to do what we did. So that's one little piece. Like Christian said, we're getting we have computers in the room that the kids can use, but it would be amazing if they could do work at home using their Chromebooks. And I don't know if we can get there or not.
Can Chromebooks handle?
It's not the Chromebook, it's because Citrix can bring in anything. It was the Citrix licensing connection that was the missing piece.
Okay.
Yeah, it's with Citrix, basically, with Photoshop, you couldn't use Control or Shift. So if anybody knows anything about Photoshop, which means you can only do about a quarter of what you're really supposed to be able to do. And if you do anything key commands, which you can get good, that's what you do, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I can't do anything. So that was it's my understanding with Adam explained to me is basically it's a connection between the program, Photoshop, or any Adobe thing, and basically Citrix, and so they just would work together. So he was working on it.
How many kids are doing digital stuff?
A lot.
Yeah.
Because they can do it on their phones too.
Right.
I mean, there's free apps out there that they can do that just so easily. And they make that transition easily too, because you can do a drawing, you can scan it, you can bring it into a digital program and then work on it again, change the color, do all sorts of things. So kids who aren't even in art are doing digital art.
Maybe this is a question for Matt, but where Andre, right, came into City High a couple times and did the design, clothing design. Does that fall in your guys' realm, or where is it?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I was actually thinking about it a little bit when Sarah talked about some of the stuff we tried to do with maker spaces, and whether it was video production or even some music production tools that the different maker spaces in the secondary buildings be able to do. And that's some of where Andre's work came out of. It was really from that idea. And so we partnered with ICAD, and he came in and did really was like a project runway type class, and design class that he was doing in conjunction with a staff member we had there at City High. And so that was an offering we were able to do for a couple years. Financially, something just became something that wasn't viable for us because he was, needed some compensation for his time and for us to be able to run the class for the amount of students. And so we didn't do that this year, but we had a pretty successful offering for a couple years doing that. It's kind of an outside the box idea.
Any other questions?
Then I also have Regina Bailey here. So Regina's going to talk a little bit about the Any Given Child program, which is a really nice connection for the community and the school district to support arts.
The video. I have a link on this handout. I'm not going to show it because Diane asked me to keep my remarks to 5 minutes, and the video's 4:37.
Plus you got to be able to look around.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then let's go.
So the link is on the back of this handout, and it's on our Facebook page, the Any Given Child Facebook page. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to talk about the Any Given Child program. In 2012, Iowa City was selected as the 8th of what are now 27 communities that are Kennedy Center, ensuring the arts for any given child sites. And the goal of the Kennedy Center program is to ensure equity in arts access for K through 8 students. And what the district here had seen is even though we have great, as you just heard, great curricular offerings that are available to all students, when it came to community access or community arts resources, not all students had the same access. Some schools had, did field trips and had artists come in. Other schools weren't doing so much of that. And so the Any Given Child program seeks to have equity by providing those community resources to all of our schools. And how we approach it, we're the only Any Given Child site that is district-based, so we have great access to our kids. Many other sites are very jealous of that because they're right there. And so we get the opportunity to serve every child in the district, and that's not the case at other sites. And so when we do a program, we do it, if we have a first grade program, it's in 20, next year 21 schools. All the kids in our district get the same program. And so we work with community partners. We work with our community resources. That's a key part of what Any Given Child does. And some of our community programming partners, Iowa Children's Museum, Orchestra Iowa, University of Iowa Symphony Orchestra, Art Share at University of Iowa Office of Outreach and Engagement, MC Ginsberg's Object of Art, Iowa City Film Scene, that was the animation. We had Mark Jones from Iowa City Film Scene come in and teach stop motion animation to our 6th graders, and of course Hancher. In addition, we have the opportunity to work with dozens of local teaching artists, so we get artists in the classroom, which teachers really appreciate, that kids get to work up close and personal with people who are doing music for their life or art for their life or animation, as Mark does. And so I've provided the list of programs that we are planning to program next year. Opera Iowa is not next year, and I have every 3 years on it before, but next year isn't an Opera Iowa year, but I included it on the list because it's something we do. And so as you can see, for every grade, we have a programming experience. And what Any Given Child does is work with the teachers, and the teachers, whether it's classroom teachers, art teachers have been great, music teachers, also welcoming and flexible, because this requires scheduling flexibility to get an ensemble to come to the first grade classroom or to the music classroom, or with our 5th grade artists in residence. Boy, we hit just that window where we were having so many challenges with weather, and the 5th grade teachers were just so flexible, and fortunately we had an artist that had a very flexible schedule, so we were able to get the programming in the timeline that we planned. This year we had a storyteller who worked with students, and it was a Constellation Stories project. I've included some feedback that we gather about our programs on the back of this. Kinder Tales is the program that we take kindergartners to the Iowa Children's Museum. And the surprising thing that I learned from that is not all kids in our district have ever been to the Children's Museum. About half, I would say, had never been there before. So it's a great opportunity for them to explore the museum. The activity it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, an idea jar for telling stories. So they go through the museum to different rooms and gather ideas for their idea jar. And then we, at the end of that activity, the museum teachers basically tell a story, pulling ideas out of the idea jar that the kids have provided, and then they take the idea jar back to their school. So teachers can use that in the classroom. I've also included feedback from teachers and from students. So the feedback from students is always the most fun. For our Constellation Story project, you can see there. And then 8th graders get to go to a live arts performance at Hancher. This year it was a 2-person play they called her Vivaldi. And it was a very quiet piece. And so we were interested to see how the students would react. And of course there was the range of responses to it, but you can read some of the comments below, and some of the kids really clicked into what the play was about, and they were surprised at the elements of music as well as in a production, because it integrated music into the theater production, and that was surprising to them. So I think that they had a really good experience. So that's what Any Given Child does. It's an enhancement of the arts experience, the great curricular arts experiences that we already have in our district. And its purpose is to connect students with the community resources so they can avail themselves of those opportunities. Parents can avail their families of those opportunities. But the neatest thing is, if you're a kid in the district, if you're a first grader or a kindergartner and you've never been to the Children's Museum, we're going to make sure it happens. And that's the neat thing that this program does. So, any questions? I'd love to talk more and more about it. So, talk all night about it. So,
You had about half the 8th graders say they've never been to Hampshire.
what?
You had about half the 8th graders say they've
Right.
never been to Hampshire.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And when we took the kids to Voxman, because when Voxman opened and we had that available, and the University Symphony Orchestra has been so great to work with. Sarah has been part of working with Dr. Jones, who is now retired. Kids were climbing up the stairs, these are 4th graders, and they would look at the metal sculpture at the top of the stairs, and they just, Hogwarts lives. It's just so, the building, everything about it. And so we really tried to provide information about the sculptures that are in Voxman, as well as have the music experience. And then they have some archaeological pieces that were there when they dug the site for the building. So we had the kids look at those. So they can have, we try to cram as much experience into that field trip as we can. But it's been great. And the interim orchestra director, we've already made contact with him, and he's planning for our October 2nd performance next year.
So how, when you're working with Hampshire, how do they pick the performance? Or is it just out of what they've got, they say this might be best?
Because we have a relationship with Hampshire was a part of the original application to the Kennedy Center. And so because we have a relationship with Hampshire, and their education manager sits on the advisory committee, she's the chair this year, they keep us in mind. And what an honor, right? They keep our kids in mind when they think about programming. And I got to tell you, next year, and Sarah can speak to this because we saw it when we were at the Any Given Child conference, our 8th graders are going to see Alvin Ailey, and they're going to see the Revelations piece, which is a piece that was choreographed in 1960. It's a seminal modern dance piece. And I get all shaky because it's one of the neatest things I've ever seen in my life. And when I was in DC last year for the Any Given Child conference, we saw Revelations again. It was my 2nd time, and I thought, oh, I just wish that the kids in the district could see this. It's so amazing. And then Micah said, we've got Ailey for the 8th graders. And it's going to be amazing because the first half of the performance, the dancers are going to talk about it. They're going to talk about what the piece represents. And the music for the piece is spirituals. And the dancing is just incredible. I don't know. And so I would also suggest that you buy tickets March 10th. It's an amazing performance. So our 8th graders get that. Sorry, I just had to tell you about that. It's so exciting.
They called it Vivaldi, and it was a great performance. And one of the many things, the actor, the writer-director, came out and just was interacting with the audience and talking. And it was a lot of kids asking questions about acting. And it was, I could imagine being a young performer like that, being pretty darn inspiring to see this quite talented individual with any voice imaginable.
And one of the things that we do know, and this was in the survey when we became an Any Given Child site, is our kids aren't, especially K through 8, exposed very much to theater. And so that's something we try to address as we can. But the comments really ranged. The student feedback really ranged for this Vivaldi. They were shocked. I would say most of them were shocked that it was only 2 people on stage. That was odd to them. So
watching it doesn't seem that way.
That's exactly what some of them said. Yeah. So it was a neat experience. But something, well, you never know how an 8th grader's going to respond.
Well, yeah, and it was different. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, yeah.
You reminded me too, when the 4th graders see the orchestra at Boxman, the director always points out which students are from the Iowa City School District. So the kids can see that, that could be me one day there on stage. And we do that in 4th grade, which is right before 5th grade, which is when they pick whether they want to join one of those performance music programs. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
I just have 3 quick comments. So, I volunteered last year with the Twain Kindergarten when they went to the museum. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that was fun. I couldn't make it work this year, but you are right. There's a lot of kids that have never been there, and they love the experience. Secondly, the video that Ruthina mentioned with Mark Jones. So when Mark Jones was at Lemmy, he was the guy that Sean's talking about for my kids that made my kids really enjoy art. And so when they left, and when you have a kid crying because her art teacher left at the end of the year, I mean, that he did something good. And then my third comment was, it's fun. I work with Devin through Hancher, through my job at Shields, and we get to pick out the performance that Shields helps sponsor. And he's always makes sure to point out which one is going to be the school one. It's not always the one we choose, but it's neat to be able to see it beforehand, and they do a good job of picking that out. So.
Yeah, and it's so nice that they do keep us in mind, and they know that we will bring all the 8th graders to see it, as well as some of the elementary schools also attend. So that's pretty amazing that we have the largest performance venue in town keeping us in mind for their performance selections.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thanks so much to the fine arts folks. I really appreciate it. I think it helps the board, especially with art. I think it can get, our community supports us obviously, but when you're at the board table and you're looking at 30,000 people making budget cuts, we want to make sure that this isn't a nicety. That this is something that's vital to our offering and really important for kids to engage with as a part of their education. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Right.
Let's swap them out for the preschool group. The preschool group would like to come up to the table. If you
Please join us. We're
He's got copies.
Oh, that's okay.
So I'm not sure if you remember, but about this time last year, we presented some preschool data to you, and then you directed us to convene a preschool task force to really look at the idea of a preschool center concept. So we started that this fall. We had a group of people meeting on a regular basis, and we have quite a few of the members here, but the members are listed on the doc that I'm passing around. And we surveyed kindergarten parents regarding the preschool experiences. Our coordinator, Jay Beaver, went to a preschool center in another community to kind of see how that works. We looked at a lot of preschool data. We've talked and we've discussed. We've looked at really the barriers to preschool attendance. I think that's really what we focused on. We know that in our district right now, we have more than 20% of our kids who do not attend preschool. And we'd like to see 100% of our kids attending preschool in some format, whether it's a district preschool or a community-based preschool. We'd like to get that number because we also have looked at our data and we see that kids who do attend a preschool perform better when they come into kindergarten than kids who don't. So we're looking at a preschool center being really a way that we could enhance those opportunities for our kids and remove some of the barriers that our current setup provides. So looking at really our current preschool opportunities, right now we really offer half-day programs. We have a few select full-day programs, but mainly they're half-day programs, and not even in all of our elementaries, and about 14 of them. So we have some elementaries there just isn't space, and we have several elementaries where there was space this year, there won't be space next year. So we're constantly playing that game of where can we live, where can we reside, and what can we offer for our parents. So that's one barrier that we know exists out there. Right now, parents have to transport their kids to and from. So They got to somehow, a lot of working parents get their kids to some daycare center and then have somehow they have to get them from daycare to preschool and then back again from preschool to daycare and then back to work. And for a lot of parents, that's a struggle to be able to do. So we know that's a barrier. And when we look at our data as far as who's not coming to preschool, of course, there's a higher percentage of kids who are on free reduced lunch not coming, and a higher percentage of students of color who are not coming than our white students or students who are not on free reduced lunch. And then again, like I said, our data shows that we will increase performance for kids who do attend. And someone asked about ELL students as well. We don't, technically, students in preschool don't qualify for ELL services, but we will attest, and our preschool teachers will tell us that, boy, do we see a growth in their language ability, between the beginning of preschool to the end of preschool when they're ready to go into kindergarten. It's just a dramatic change in those kids. So we know that we are providing a service for those little kids who now can enter kindergarten with understanding the school structure, understanding how preschool, school system works, and have a lot of the language skills that they need to be successful in kindergarten. So, if it's okay, Amy, I'm going to pass it on to Amy to talk kind of about what that preschool center concept would look like.
Yeah, so we centered around this larger idea that we'd all agree to 3 centers would be necessary, with one settling in each of those attendance zones, high school attendance zones. We had a little bit of a conversation about whether we would try to operate a model where we would have a few PKs left in our buildings along with the centers, but we really landed with, nope, we would just completely go away from having PKs housed in our buildings to these preschool centers. Each center would provide preschool as well as wraparound daycare services for approximately 300 to 400 students. So right now our class sizes are averaging almost 1,200 students. When you think about 400 then at 3 centers, we're getting right to 100% of those kiddos. We did have some conversation around, though, being cognizant of our community partners that are in existence and not wanting to completely close that down, as well as it is a requirement in the statewide voluntary preschool grant that we do utilize community partners, so we couldn't do that regardless. Part of each center then would be dedicated to childcare. We had a lot of conversation around the fact that these little ones shouldn't be in any one classroom all day long, and so the idea that they could go elsewhere within the same building for a daycare, whether that was at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, but that we would still offer that free preschool programming to them at some point. So of course then parents could elect just to go to the preschools like they could now, or they could do some daycare wrapped around with it, or of course they wouldn't have to attend either.
And then moving into benefits of why we feel like this would be important. First and foremost, we were thinking of equity of our students and our families. What we see right now is that access to preschool is such a problem for some families for a number of reasons. Transportation we talked about, but also that accessibility piece of, a working parent. We talked a little bit about those FRL kids, or but I look at even myself as a working parent. I'm a preschool teacher, and if my children's district hadn't offered some transportation for my kids or another option for part of the day, I couldn't have sent my own kids to preschool. So when we look at those benefits, the option of programs to meet the family's needs, if we house that all in one building, we could do a half-day preschool. They could choose to do a half-day of preschool and a half-day of childcare and then go home on either side, or they could even do that half-day preschool, half-day childcare, and have some rock care on either end. Currently, we only have one building in the district who's able to offer childcare on either end of the school day. We run a full-day program, and we also find that research shows that developmentally appropriate practice would be a half-day for most kids. I find that full day really is taxing on those little ones. It would give us an opportunity for more diverse classrooms and experience for all. So what you find now is that some of our buildings have very diverse populations. So some of our programs have that, and some of them you don't get a lot of diversity at all. Availability of consistent interpreters who have some knowledge about young children. So maybe we could be looking at paraeducators who had some, who were bilingual or, some supports that way. Increase family engagement opportunities. This is a huge goal of the preschool team right now overall, but it's kind of tricky to try and pull that in individual buildings. If we were able to be in one spot, that might be easier to pull in that family engagement piece. Increase access to childcare for students with special needs. That is really a huge issue for a lot of parents who have children with special needs. A lot of daycares and centers won't take those kids, and if we could provide those families with really quality childcare within that same building and with people that they know, that would really be beneficial to those kids. It would give us some flexibility to match student needs with classroom factors. So, right now most of us are housed in a building by ourselves or maybe with one other program, and if we were able to be in a place where there were multiple classrooms, then you might look at this kid and you might say, hey, your group that you do in the afternoon works great for that kid. Let's do some trading around, or just matching certain kids to certain teachers who maybe have more background in a certain area would really give us some flexibility to meet needs that way. Classroom equity with enrollment and student makeup. What you'll find right now is that some of our classrooms have 20 kids in the morning, 20 kids in the afternoon. Some of our programs have 20 kids in the morning and 11 kids in the afternoon. There's really some inequity that way, which affects both staff and those students. Also the student makeup. Some classrooms have several kids who have IEPs, some classrooms don't have any, so just being able to spread that out a little bit so that our classrooms were much more equitable. And also just that security of knowing where preschool will be every year. Right now, when a building runs out of space, often preschool is the one who gets moved. So you have programs that are moving around all the time. And we even have buildings that have been built with rooms that were specifically designed for preschool kids, and now there's no preschools left in those buildings. They've been moved away. So, that kind of moves into that equity, not only for the kids and those families, but also for staff. Knowing where you're going to be and having consistency with where you're going to be, and consistency with the materials that you're going to be working with. It would reduce isolation from Java-like groups. We really don't have a lot of opportunity for collaboration, problem solving, brainstorming, those sorts of things. If you have an issue within your classroom, you're kind of an island at this point, and that preschool piece is kind of a different beast than when you get into the elementary age. So having some collaboration with others. Also having our preschool coaches on site, they could really do some real-time coaching and be helping with that collaboration piece. It would provide some efficiencies of the ability to increase enrollment, not only due to that child care factor and the transportation, but also there's certain areas of our district that fill up right away. So like in North Liberty, some of those programs are filling up the same day that the site opens up, and then those families aren't wanting to drive their kids far away to somewhere else. So, it would open up some more spots in those areas and allow us to increase enrollment that way. We talked a lot about transportation. Right now, there's no transportation that's provided for preschool students, and that creates a really big barrier for families. We had talked about the idea that if a bus route is already running, that if a new route's not needed, if it can just be extended, that there's not additional cost to that. And so looking at maybe being able to stagger the times of the preschool day so that we could just extend those routes as opposed to adding more, then perhaps that would give us a segue into that transportation part. And also there's already all of our preschool kids who receive special education services are eligible for transportation. And so because of that, there's already buses that are running to and from these locations. We're just not able to put our general ed students on there, but we might be able to work that way. We would be able to maximize staff resources across classrooms. You know, right now with our paras and those kinds of things, if we could figure out some ways to streamline breaks and lunches and, you know, those kinds of things and have different coverage in different areas, we could really utilize our people better and perhaps be able to save some money that way and use people more effectively. Also, that resource and material pooling and sharing, what you'll find is our classrooms aren't terribly equitable that way always. You know, there's some classrooms that are very well equipped and some that don't have what they need. And by having a center option rather than having to purchase all of those things all the time for classrooms in order to keep them kind of on the same level, we could really be doing more sharing with those. We could combine some part-time staff to full-time employees. I think that there's a lot of places that have part-time paraeducators at this point, and if we could convert those to full-time employees, it would be another way to be a little more efficient. And perhaps we could have some on-site people who would be strictly dedicated to preschool. There's this line here about on-site enrollment with consistent PK secretary. I don't think anybody understands, me included, what a nightmare it is to do that enrollment process. And different buildings do that differently. Right now, Randy oversees it for us, but if you had a consistent person who was doing those kinds of things all the time, they'd be much more familiar. So we could really increase quality by having things that were really designed just for preschool age students. So environmentally, routines and structures, those kinds of things. When we're in our buildings, things are really set up for K through 6th grade students, the way that our buildings run, how lunches run, how the hallways run, how, you know, those kinds of things. And by allowing it to be designed specifically for our littler people, that could really increase the quality for us. A lot of us are in classrooms that were designed for older kids, and so sometimes even, you know, simple things like counter heights, you know, things like that are not always where we need them to be. Again, going back to that, having fluid classrooms, being able to match kids to different supports and activities. We had talked about AEA staff who specialize in preschool, being able to spend more time in those center areas. There would be less time where they would be traveling back and forth between buildings, and more time that they could really be working with students. That the outdoor space that's designed for preschool, a lot of the K through 5 equipment is stuff that we can't use. There's age requirements on that. And so when a preschool moves into a new building, then they have to have some special outdoor equipment put in. So that would also be an efficiency, because if we had it one time put in and it was specifically for our younger kids, then we wouldn't be having to finagle new ways to do that in different spaces. Consolidated opportunities for community and visitor assemblies. So if the fire station came in, or if the dental people came in, that was kind of something I thought about in the last presentation where she was talking about the inconsistencies with what different buildings do. Some of us are fortunate, you know, even I'm in Hills, and so you would think that we would not get as much opportunity for those kinds of things, but actually we've got really great, you know, a tiny little community. So we get to go to the fire station, and we get to go to the post office, and we get to go to the bank and see all those things where some of the schools that are in Iowa City aren't in a place where proximity allows them to do those kinds of things. But we could bring that all in. We could possibly do a preschool-specific calendar with staggered hours. We talked about maybe to possibly allow for transportation or to better meet parent needs. There's a place on here that talks about the potential demonstration site for state related to PBIS, and that's something I won't get into a lot, but there is a link. Do we have that somewhere where people can find it?
I can put that on. Yep.
We have recently gotten some national attention in what we're doing with our PBIS, and it's really exciting, and there's been some talk about possibly even being a demonstration site, which is pretty exciting for our district to have that kind of attention brought to us. looking at maybe having a designated administrator with an early childhood background. A lot of principals, some are really great with early childhood things, and some don't know anything about early childhood, and it really, having some background in that, it would really be beneficial for teachers and kids. And then just, common space and being able to have some additional supports. This talks about music for a nurse or things like that, but being able to have some common supports that we might not be able to get in our regular building, but could be provided if we went to this sort of model. So.
And I've forgotten to introduce Molly Hartford, who's our preschool teacher from Hills, as you probably have deduced by now. And one thing that really surprised me about her program, that she's one of the programs that has them before and after school, and that people from Iowa City drive their children down to Hills to participate because it's one of the few options that we have for that all-day child care experience. And probably because Molly's there too. And then Jay Beaver, you've met Jay before, he's talked to you before, our preschool coordinator, so he's going to talk a little bit about the building.
Yeah, the next couple of sections are just what we'd be looking at as far as building, structure, facilities for the center. So like some things we've already talked about, having those separate spaces for preschool and child care, so the kids that are going to be there for the full day and the wrap around, they have separate spaces to be in, so they're not in their classroom full time all day long. Talked about the 300 possible 400 kids, so we're looking at around 12 classroom spaces that would be a combination of preschool and child care. Some common sense things for early childhood center, preferably a one-story building without a lot of stairs, handicap accessible would be extremely important. Storage, because we have lots of stuff in preschool. Multi-purpose room that could be used for large motor activities, meals, indoor recess in the winter. Place for staff, workrooms, bathrooms, office space, for secretary, nurses, etc. Offices for AEA, so we talked about having those kind of early childhood specific people from working with some AEA, as well as speech therapists, PTs, OTs, psychologists, having a space for them in the building. That would also go along with some space for doing therapies if they're doing some individual therapy with kids. Parking, bus loading, unloading, outdoor space, the shade and fence, that's one of our criteria we have to meet. Hard surface areas, and then we talked a little about the importance of having a location of the center close to a city bus route, because even though child care and wraparound will help parents get their kids to and from as far as their work schedule goes, but that still leaves out a lot of parents that don't have transportation. Just having that ability to have close to a bus line for families, we think, is important. And then classroom considerations, just kind of what we would be looking at for the makeup of the classrooms, size-wise, as far as the actual lighting, multiple surfaces, counters and sinks that are at child level, bathrooms in the rooms would be great. We have that in some of our classrooms around the district, but not all. That's a big deal when you're 3 and 4 years old. And then just some basic things, outlets and things like that we need to have. It's a little more specific than what we have in some of our classrooms. I think the big thing with the classroom considerations and what Molly was talking about was kind of that meeting the needs of what we have to have for a preschool. Because right now, being in all the different buildings, Molly has a great classroom. There's actually 2 classrooms that have been converted into 1. It's a great space. Another classroom is about the size of this room, or a little bit smaller than that. So we have less kids we can have in that classroom. So it's kind of, right now it's based on the building and where we're at as far as classroom space and if it meets our needs or not. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Brizard for transportation.
All right. So this is a really popular subcommittee. Everybody wanted to be on it. I'm glad that I got to represent this group. So as we talked about earlier, identifying transportation is one of those main barriers that we had, or we currently have. So thinking about providing transportation, making sure that we provide that at the beginning and end times of that of the preschool day. Again, Molly already touched on this, but maybe extending that route somehow, along with already having a route for students currently getting bus services for preschool. A lot of those routes also have paraeducators on those buses as well, and so we'd want to make sure that that each route would have that paraeducator to help support the needs of the kids on the bus. There was a lot of debate in the committee about this piece, and we felt in the end, I think there was consensus that it would be probably best if we could provide that transportation to and from the center, both for the morning and the afternoon section. So to and from in the AM, and then to and from in the afternoon, so as not to limit some folks that might have varying needs. With that, we felt like there were some different avenues or different branches that we could take with that. One would be just to transport students directly to and from the center from their home location. Another idea was to transport to and from on the same bus as our K-6 students, for example, and then just have that group continue on the bus to the preschool center after we drop the siblings off at or the other kids off at the home attendance school. Or having parents maybe bring their kids into the resident school, and then having a bus that would transport. They might stop at a few different schools, pick kids up, and bring them to the center and then back again. So those are some of the transportation pieces that we talked about. I don't know if there's anything.
And then I just asked Craig to talk a little bit. I call Craig the dream crusher.
With that introduction.
Do you have theme music? I was just practicing for July 1. So I'll make this really short and quick. The funding for preschool primarily comes from the statewide voluntary preschool program dollars. It's the regular program cost per pupil times the number of preschool students that we've identified that qualify for that program times 50%. They only funded at the 50% level. For FY20, that's roughly $1.7 million, which is a good chunk of change for that program. Then, of course, there are things like parent tuition. We do have some categorical, small categorical funds that sources that can be used in addition to that, empowerment grants, scholarships, and things like that, maybe even a little bit in the way of carryover funds by using the Flex account, but that's kind of a one-time deal, and then those are done. And so, but all of those pale in comparison to the statewide voluntary preschool dollars that are generated each year. And then the board has discussed briefly the PEARL, and we do have an opinion from legal counsel on what that could do, and the board could choose to spend dollars from the PEARL in the way they've been defined by legal counsel for supporting the preschool program. So those are the resources that I was asked to research on behalf of the preschool committee, and I would take any questions you may have regarding the funding.
So 1.7 is what the district has for this, is what you're saying?
That's this coming year.
This coming year.
That's correct, for statewide voluntary preschool dollars.
And on the transportation portion, we're talking about 3 and 4-year-olds, or what's the age of the kids that are going to be going on the bus?
Primarily 3 and 4-year-olds, I believe. Yeah.
3 and 4-year-olds, 300 to 400 of them to each center.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking.
I think so.
Would that require aides on the buses too? I'm just trying to think logistically, if you have 43 and 4-year-olds on a bus. Paras on there and that.
Well, seat belts and car seats would be required under Iowa law for
that as well, so we'd have to have special.
Special
are we thinking buses, are we thinking vans, or what are we thinking?
Yes, those are all possibilities, I'm sure.
Oh, okay, so a bus with 40 or 50 car seats.
I have a question about that. Is that, do 4-year-olds have to, my 4-year-olds, all 4 of them, rode a bus to preschool and did not, and weren't in car seats. And I can't remember, I know we had to do that with our special education kiddos when we used to do early childhood special ed, and I was involved in that, but is that, do they have to have?
You don't have to be in a car seat.
I didn't think.
Like I said, seatbelts, and the car seats on the bus have a weight limit that they use. So all the kids are on seatbelts because they exceed that weight limit with car seats.
And Craig, you said Pearl's roughly 800.
For this year is just under $900,000. Yeah, and it always grows with your assessed valuation. Its limit is 13.5 cents if that's what's passed by the community. So it'll just grow with your assessed value.
And could you use that money for building as well? Facility? No.
No, you have to be really careful there. According to the legal opinion that we received, there has to be a community education component, and so you'd have to work really closely with your municipal partners, and it's actually for the operation of the program, not for the facility.
Could it be used for transportation?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's one of those areas that you have to explore with some additional exploration.
And who gave us the legal opinion?
Joe Holland, came from Joe Holland's firm.
You could build your playground.
Playgrounds, yeah.
One of the things that Molly touched on that I just wanted to highlight is that there would be efficiencies, there would be savings in this model versus in staffing in particular versus what we're doing right now with our multiple sites. And so there would be some cost savings there that could potentially be used, or maybe that was in here somewhere, for transportation.
I just got a couple of comments. I think that we're probably all in agreement that having greater access to pre-K is a good thing. And so what my head is around, like, I hear all of the positives of the center, and I get them all. I think they're all great things. But in my head, I hear, well, only going to that, and I was like, okay, well, does that then create other barriers that weren't in place by limiting how we're going to do it? So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that I think there were things that I would think about. A couple off the top of my head, if the kid's at a center and it works great for the family because they get them on the bus and they get there and they're there all day long or whatever it is, and then something happens in the middle of the day. Kid breaks an arm like mine did. And they can't get there because it's not close to where they're at. So that would be something I would have to think about. What would you do with them in the middle of the day, kind of thing. I know there's a lot of in-home daycares that are really close to our elementary schools that they walk as little groups to and from the school. I know my kid did that. So making sure that if you have the bus, one of the ideas is that the bus goes back to the local elementary. That might still work to have people pick them up there. But if that's not happening, that would be a concern to try and figure out how to make that work. And just making sure that it's, from an outsider looking at it, right, saying, oh, well, that's way over there and way over there. Even if you got 3 of them, my way over there might not be the same as somebody else's way. If it's 2 miles away, that might be too far for some folks, potentially. So the transportation, it does come rise to the top there. I do like what a center does have to offer, right? I think the efficiencies of it. I think having more classrooms together, right? I mean, we talk about that all the time with our teachers at other grade levels being able to work with each other and stuff. So I see a definite benefit there. I did have one question. So I'm going to age myself. A decade ago, when my kids were in preschool, they were, it was all-day preschool with wraparound in one of our schools, and we paid tuition. So they were they went outside and stuff, but for the most part, they were in the same room for their childcare as they were for preschool, and I didn't see a problem with that. So I'm curious to, I get it philosophically that it's good to have them in different places, but I was just kind of wondering where the.
I can do that because I have, it's my program that has, we're full day and we have wrap on either end of the day. So I have kids who are coming into that program at 7 o'clock in the morning and not leaving until 5:30, and we don't do specials, and we don't eat lunch outside of our room. We do all outside for recess when the weather allows, and we sometimes walk down to the hall to go to the bathroom, but otherwise, they never leave those four walls. And even for me, I find myself, crawling up the walls sometimes. But I think that it's an awfully long day for them to be in that same area and to have those same materials and, day in and day out, they're doing the same thing. What you also find is that within that space, I'm not there all day and my staff isn't there all day. That changes. So when you start the wrap portion of that and that changes over to new staff, now you've got different people with a different set of expectations, even if you've really laid that out, different people implement that in different ways. So you've got a different set of people within the same area using the same materials but with a different set of rules and expectations. And that gets really confusing for those kids. So I find, as the teacher, that's a little bit frustrating because I spend a lot of time on structure and routines and trying to really work on what we need to do in the classroom. And then when they have a different expectation for the other part of their day with the same materials and in the same environment, that really gets tricky. And I think that's really confusing to kids as well. But just as far as their own, like I said, I get to leave for lunch. I get to walk out of that classroom once in a while, and to think that you were in the same space for that amount of time, all day, every day, it really does become taxing on some of them. And it also, I'm not sure that it's the best use of our resources. We rest every afternoon, and it's necessary. I've tried it without, and I wouldn't do it without. But we rest every afternoon. We have, a snack built into our afternoon. Our afternoon looks a lot like daycare, and frankly, the school district's paying me a lot of money to be doing daycare for half of the day. I really could be providing quality services for something else, and they could be in a different area receiving really quality childcare for that time with paraeducators providing that.
So part of what my question was going to be is what's a full day kindergarten or preschool look like versus the half daycare, half preschool model?
Yeah, so we do most of our, we still do some activities in the afternoon, but we do the really bulk of our learning in the morning. They're fresh then, they're ready. So that is when the main part of our learning takes place. And then in the afternoon, we do lunch, we do a rest time, we do a snack, and then we put in, I usually try and do some other, I'm sure different programs would do it differently. I try to do some writing activities. I try to do a little reading, but it's a short piece because those kids, partly they all wake up in a different state of mind. Some of them are ready to go, and some of them are groggy until they're walking out the door. But the bulk of our learning is really in the morning. If we were able, now there's some kids who don't necessarily have to have that rest time, or they might have it earlier. If we were able to separate that into 2 half-day programs, then you could do all the main learning part, you could do that in 2 half-day parts and be reaching twice as many kids, if that makes sense.
Why are the rooms inequitable in materials across the district?
Materials-wise, not so much. It's got to do more probably with the space that the classrooms have. So for instance, at Penn, when they remodeled, they took the old gym and they cut it in half, the wall down the middle, and preschool is on one side. So that preschool is an entire half, the size of half a gym. It's huge. If you've been there, so that classroom has a lot more materials in it, as opposed to Kirkwood, where we're in a kind of a typical first grade size classroom. That's the one I was saying was probably a little smaller than this space, so just not space to have the same amount of equipment, same amount of materials, things like that. So one reason space in different buildings.
And perhaps even storage. You know, I mean, some of our classrooms have a lot of storage area where they're able to house some things that might be, so that you can do more changing what you're doing and you can keep things fresh for the kids. And, you know, there's a lot of that involved in a play-based curriculum, and some of us don't have a whole lot of that storage piece. So, I mean, I think that also plays into that. And I will say the district has done really stepped up in the last few years, and part of the problem for a long time is that you had brand new programs who were coming in and they had a brand new classroom and they had all brand new stuff, materials, and it was all great things. And then there were classrooms like Hills, which is a fantastic space, but has been there since, you know, who knows when, and some of the things that we were using were still the things that we were using when it started, you know. And so there's really been an initiative, though, to slowly build up each of, you know, I think there's sort of a rotation now, and in the last few years, we've really been able to update some of those materials.
The enrollment question, how would you manage enrollment at each one, just like who gets in? You know, like is there a certain number of FRL kids that would get in? Is there a certain number of paid spots? You know, like how, like?
I think once we get to that point of center, then maybe looking at a lot of different, we have a lot more options for funding sources. But right now with our half-day model, really the statewide is all we really need, except for a few tuitions paying spots. The other centers that operate in other districts, they partner with Head Starts and have some Head Start funded classrooms. They use child care assistance from the state to provide funding. So I think once we got to that point of what the center would look like, and the students that would be attending, and all those different funding sources we would bring in, that would kind of determine how that enrollment would work. Right now, because it's all statewide, we just do first come, first serve when we open up that enrollment. But I think definitely if we had that center model with more options, then we'd be looking at more groups of kids and how we determine who's coming and how many spots are going to be funded. You know, through child care assistance or partnering with Head Start, or how many will be funded through parents that can pay tuition. Those are the conversations that we have to continue to happen as we get closer to that.
So how much do these centers cost?
Like the cost of a new school, right? I mean, it's 12 classrooms is almost as big as some of the schools we have.
You probably don't need a gym. You probably don't. There's probably a lot of things you don't.
Multi-purpose room.
We want an indoor room where kids could do gross motor skills, so
I
it
mean,
doesn't have to be as big as a gym.
Is it as expensive as elementary school? I mean, it's got to be a little bit cheaper.
I'd say 9 to 10 maybe based on what I heard today.
9 to 10 per
school.
Per. So then I see, you know, we have kind of these funding sources that. So I guess maybe help me see. So say 30 million. How does that fit into what we've got here as far as save? You know, can we borrow?
You're asking me?
Well,
not right now. Right now, the facility master plan 1.0 is obligated those dollars through the end of this next school year when those plans are completed.
So after that.
If it's going to come out of that, general obligation bond,
Well, let's
new
take
save.
that off. Let's not talk about go.
I'm just giving you choices. So you got that. You've got save dollars when they become available. Those are probably.
We could. So is that turned out right? We can borrow. We could borrow against that. Future
Not yet.
No.
No. Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
23.
Yeah. 23.
Well, the biggest thing is operation costs.
And
that's the variable that no one's even, that's what I went to grab before I left.
Well,
We know we have 1.7.
Yeah.
And that, but also we're talking, in that same breath, we're talking about carryover dollars from dropout prevention. I don't know that we're doing well enough with dropout prevention to be robbing from that.
Yeah, but I don't know, I feel like we address kids early in pre-K. We are getting students prepared, and I haven't looked at the research, but I'm guessing because they're more prepared for elementary school, they're not gonna be behind in reading. This is truly equity, getting every student into a pre-K experience, and my guess is we have fewer students dropping out.
Okay,
That went through the district, and so I think we need to look at those kinds of research again. I'm not well versed in it, but I think that's kind of the theory around pre-K.
We've got ELL kids and we got kids dropping out right now. We're gonna have kids dropping out next year. We're gonna have kids dropping out the next 5-6 years that are gonna need some of those funds. And that's my concern, is when we start robbing from that one for this, that's
It's really a longer term play.
well, I understand. I understand. You're trying to head it off, but we also have some that are gonna be in the system for 2 to 3 years that we lose, and we don't get to start over again with them as 3 and 4-year-olds. But
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we could spend all dropout prevention, but of the kids who go through our system, you know, what we do know is more of them will read by 3rd grade. And then we know what the numbers look like if you can read by 3rd grade or not. And if you have Pearl, you know, some of that money can be used for operations. And again, I mean, I'm not saying we're gonna do this and start bond language right now, but.
Well, I think
It's
I'm
not.
more in line with what Phil's saying, is you're not gonna be able to start taking all that money. You still have kids in the 2nd grade, the 3rd grade, and the 4th grade, so you would have to phase that in over time. I mean, it's not gonna be, those dollars aren't gonna be there right now, or right away to start it.
And you're always gonna need some dropout prevention for the kids who don't go through your system. You know, that you get that move in as refugee or whomever. You know, we will need some funds for those kids. But I think it's just something that we weigh and we look at, as opposed to, you know, what is the cost benefit analysis of this? And educationally speaking, I mean, the bang for our buck, I know is here in pre-K. The logistics of how to get that buck is a big question, and a very big question, and it's not gonna come without some sacrifice, whether that's the community ponying up in a bond or some
The state
Pearl.
can do something for us. It's on our legislative advocacy.
It has been
every
for
single
some
year.
time,
We
yeah.
just keep pushing at our state level.
Yeah.
It's one additional angle. Again, long play.
I
These
mean,
are not short
we
term.
can push.
But I think also we need to pull on the expertise of our colleagues around the state that are doing this already. So Des Moines has a program where they're pulling in all these funding sources that we can't access right now because we don't have a
Head Start.
program
We
where
can't
we
do
can
Head Start,
use those
right? Because we
funding
have Head Start.
sources. So we can look at them and say, how are they doing this? And I know Jay had given us at one point a whole list of funding sources that they're using in Des Moines that we can't access, but would be available to us.
If we have, it feels like we need to find a way of starting. I mean, to your point, I mean, I don't know if it's doing all 3 at one time. I mean, that feels like big bang, very super expensive. Is there a way can we get our foot in the door in the first way, just to start getting access to some of these funds, start building the program? I don't know, just, I know we have it in some of our elementaries now, but, I mean, this is.
Like building one center.
It's just
And seeing how it
phase
goes.
one, how does it work, and I don't know. But this is immensely helpful. I mean, I just want to thank everyone who participated on the committee because, you know, spending the time to really hash through, these are not simple, easy matters, whether it's funding, whether it's transportation, whether it's, you know, the mix of students and how to put this together. So I do really appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah, very thorough, thank you.
And one thing I just wanted to touch on, because Terry's here and Lisa's here, and we didn't talk a lot about the special ed piece of this, but that's actually a very significant piece in terms of cost savings even as well. I was wondering, maybe the two of you could touch on those, how that would look different than what we have today, special ed pre-K students.
I think mostly what would look different is that we would have the ability to maybe customize the classroom setting a little bit more because we've got kind of people clustered into a few different places. right now we try to feed, my understanding is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, we try to feed students toward the elementary they're going to eventually go to if possible, which isn't always possible. So that kind of limits our classroom choices at times. So maybe, I mean, with student placement, that it might help us get a better match at times with the classroom. Yeah, that's the biggest difference I can see. Were you referring to something else?
I see from an AA perspective that part of our role is to find children who have disabilities or have high needs, and oftentimes I'm amazed that they're about ready to go to kindergarten before they even come on our radar. So this could be an early intervention that would help us identify them earlier for services.
And
get the services from a pre-K.
And if you get it earlier, the amount of money you're gonna save over that child's lifetime in school because you were able to intervene in some of that stuff early. It's just hard to say how hard it is to catch up for a few years of a kid who's needed significant services. And now you literally play catch up their whole career.
I would also say that's true with our ELL kids. You know, we were talking in our committee meeting a little bit, and every year I have kids who come to Hills and speak no English, not a single word. They don't understand a single word, you know. And I'm sending, just for example, one little boy on this year who has actually been with me this is his second year, but when he came in, he cried all day, every day, from the beginning to the end of the day for almost 6 weeks. And he didn't have any English language at all. And he will go to kindergarten next year. He understands, I think, everything I say to him. He speaks to us in English in full sentences. He interacts with his peers. He's happy to be there. His skills are pretty much on par with his peers. And if he had gone to kindergarten without that, what a mess. What a mess. You know, and years of catch up. You know, years.
One more quick question.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I wrote down was when you were talking about security of space, which I know is an issue now, but if we looked at other models, for example, looked at a middle school model where you pulled 6th grades out and now there's space available at all the schools, like would a security, I mean, if you had a preschool at every school and that was what it was for, I mean, would that kind of eliminate the security part of it?
I think yes and no. I think that you really have to, from a teacher perspective, you really have to think about how isolated we are from our colleagues, from our peers, and what a difference that makes to be able to have some collaboration, also being able to be a little more flexible within our classrooms. I mean, I think that's really huge for kids. And I still think you are, as far as the accessibility goes, are we also going to put a daycare piece into that model at every school? Because it's a huge barrier to kids being able to access preschool, that they don't have care on either end of the day. You know, at Hills we're funded by a grant. We're really fortunate to be able to have that model, but that's not everywhere. And again, that transportation piece, you know, we were just talking about that ELL kiddo. There's a 4-year-old who is eligible to come to Hills next year that we're trying to get their family to send them, and they're saying there's no way we can do it without that transportation or the child care piece. You know, and we're saying, hey, we can give you the child care, and they still can't get them there, and that little kid will start kindergarten with 0 English and 0, you know, I mean, those are just pieces to consider as far as the accessibility. I don't know that we can put that child care piece into every elementary.
I also just wanted to say one more comment about what Terry said. So early identification obviously is very important, but what I think we don't realize sometimes in our role focusing on K through 12 is that there's a lot of kids in the community that have special needs that there is no daycare for. There is just absolutely no options for them. And so they're not popping up until kindergarten because they don't have any options for daycare. And if we could provide that as part of our center, then those kids are going to rise. I think they would rise. I mean, you probably know better than I, but I think we would see them because there's something for them then. Right now, they're just, I mean, I don't know who, Handy Care provides special needs preschool, but.
I think now Child Serve provides some day hub type programming, but that's a very limited number of students. They're just not getting it going, so, I mean, it's not very, yeah, that's the other thing I thought of as Terry started talking about. Some of our students who have IEPs, you know, when you're identified for needing an IEP at 3 years old, that probably means that you've got some pretty involved needs. And I think my impression is that some of our students who come to preschool with us because they're entitled may be going to child care situations that might not be as enriching as we would like. Partially because, and some are going to child care situations that are fine, but some students have actually gotten rejected from of our higher quality child care situations because they don't have the skills or maybe resources to serve them adequately, they feel. So I wonder where some of our students are ending up with, you know, as for a daycare option because parents just don't have a choice. I mean, sometimes maybe you know, in an in-home daycare, which some are perfectly fine enriching environments. It's just that we're not really sure of that in every situation, and it's partially because of the disability. So I think it might give options to some people, some parents who don't right now have another option that they feel comfortable with.
And that leads to maybe difficult job staffing the child care portion at the center because it's a little different than, you know, what I have seen, you know, with my own kids, right? It's just people who, you know, come in and watch kids as a normal daycare, right? They're not expected to handle special needs kids, so I think it behooves us to then make sure that we have pretty rigorous hiring on that part of it, because I'm assuming that the preschool teacher is not then also doing child care, so that part becomes the important piece, right? The hiring of that part.
We'd have the capacity to provide training to that staff, which most daycare providers don't receive, so we have the opportunity, and we'd have the teachers, even though they would be providing that child care portion of the day, they're still going to be on site, still provide support, you know, if things are not working out for that child in that child care setting.
Yeah, we do provide training to people who are not certified staff now. We do have some people, certain students who are not certified staff members, but we have the kind of bandwidth to train those folks adequately to deal with students with more significant needs because we just have people who have that expertise.
And that would be a partnership that the AEH would provide with the district around the training for staff and the coaching.
Yeah, I think I've just known of parents who have actually decided they can't work because they have students with children with really special needs, and they are forced to make a lot of decisions about being asked to leave work and a lot of other. Our families with students with disabilities have a lot of limiting factors at times, and child care is definitely one of them.
Anything else? Comments, questions? I mean, I think we can keep talking about it. I guess maybe my question is, this is great, you know, what are the next steps? I mean, we're probably not gonna build this tomorrow, right? So then what are the next steps for this task force? I guess that's my question. Just, okay, thank you. See you later. I mean, I don't want it to be that, right? I know, I mean, this is a lot of thorough work and you put a lot into it, right? So,
weren't we going to explore Pearl? I mean, even though we
well, we are, yep. So I guess for this,
I mean, I know for this task force, I don't know if there's more work that they can do. I mean, they provided us a very thorough
Say not you,
report,
probably not now.
information. I think it's time for the board to decide the next steps to
Okay.
see if we can put this into fruition.
So then at what point do we have a work, because again, this is gonna be long-term planning in the best case scenario. So do we come back, and I don't also want to just say that and then park it, and then it's next year, and we did, so 6 months from now, do we come back to this in a work session, or?
I mean, I don't know what's the time frame, but as a board, if wherever we're doing agenda setting, that has to be a topic that we say we need to start working on. I know Steve had talked about looking into moving along Pearl, and maybe we do that in conjunction, bring this back up. I don't know.
So how about at some point when we have a Pearl discussion, we sort of don't forget that we should probably keep preschool in mind at a work session.
Well, I think it needs to be part of a bigger discussion overall on facilities. And
Well, yeah.
Because our last work session, we kicked out talking about paired schools again and other options like that. I think that can all be part of that
Part of this,
conversation
okay.
because
Yeah.
it's a big facilities question.
It is a big facility.
And so I think it's all related.
So just as we have those,
Bring that back.
I mean, that's probably the biggest hurdle. I mean, obviously it is also going to be staffing it and running it, no doubt about that. But without the facilities, there's nothing to staff and run. So, okay. I'm fine with that, as long as we don't forget.
I'm just wondering, Steve, do you have any thoughts as well to add to that?
Beyond that, not right now. Yeah.
How we should proceed, or what the next step should be?
I would say that we probably want to figure out how it fits into the next facility master plan version. Absent funding available to make any significant changes right now, I think we've got to figure out how it fits in the big picture. I think that's our best choice.
And I think, Pearl will help that, because as we're talking to communities about ways we can spend that money with wraparound services, and maybe what happens is with the Pearl and the FMP discussion, we start to see what the laundry list looks like, try to get a feel for the community appetite is for something like this. If it's something that people are like willing to get behind and do another go on, if that's if the community would do that, or I mean, to me, it feels like we're going to need support from our municipalities to do this in a very significant way. And so I think we're going to have to get a sense of what, I think we know what the need is, but what is the appetite for the district providing that, and getting some buy-in from all of our municipalities. I mean, we're going to be talking to Hills about, right, as a part of that FMP discussion. So I think it all kind of fits in. So we talk about the next, anything else on that before we close out? Thank you so much for coming and sharing really a lot, and a lot of work. I appreciate it. Thanks. All right, the next meeting, how do we normally do this in summer?
So our next meeting is in September, and I'm working with Brady and ICEA right now to identify some showcase events for us to bring forward for those 8 meetings that are scheduled for next year. We'll be doing that, just given 7 days of school left. We're not going to push on teachers right now, but we will be over the summer so that we can make sure and at least get the first 4 meeting content set before we start the school year. And the feedback that I got was to make sure that we identify the showcases. Then once we've identified the showcases, locate those at the sites where the programs take place. We'll be working with a principal to provide the same kind of introduction that we have right now through our DPO meetings when we're there. And then in addition to the showcase, then we would look to the board for additional items that we want to schedule so that they're, like tonight, that we would have 2 items per agenda. We'd have one would be the showcase, and then whatever the other issues are that are going to come up that we're going to need to have in front of the Ed Committee. So we're going to work on that over the summer, and we'll have a draft agenda out to you before we get to that meeting in September.
Great. Anything else on that?
I'd just like to maybe pull out some of those smaller things that we don't get to talk about a lot. So like, fine arts is the first time in 3 years, and sports is the first time in 3 years I was on board. We focus on a topic like that, but like just something that are happening at schools. Like we did the castle one, that was great because it's something unique that maybe we don't talk about a lot. Those are always helpful to explore. Hear my voice, like just be able to get in there. And,
I think when Brady puts the call out, then he and I can sit down and we can kind of cull through the list of groups that are willing to come in and do those presentations, and we'll look for those kind of programs.
Yeah, and I think that really is the idea, so we can see the cool stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Really, because otherwise we're, budgets are really fun, but we want the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I think that for staff, that's what I said this to Jenny, you get to talk about your program and the teachers you work with. It's awesome. I love when people come and do that, just as my colleagues, because they're so passionate and so dedicated and so good, so it's awesome. I think that's really powerful. So, yeah, we'll look for, I think that's right, we'll look for things that don't necessarily make it to the top of every board agenda and showcase it.
I'd like to learn more about Avid.
No, for sure.
That's a great
We're
example.
starting up, yeah.
Well, people ask me what it is, and I do a terrible job trying to explain it. 'Cause I don't feel like
We've got some super passionate staff members.
we
that
do.
love to come in and talk about
Yeah,
that.
and we were out at Kirkwood
Yeah.
a few years ago. But, but yeah, no, absolutely. Because we're rolling it up, obviously, more schools and
More schools.
Yeah.
And that would be great,
Kids,
just from, how's it going?
Sure.
Perspective too. Anything else on kind of what we want the community to look like? Kind of stuff we want to cover next year. Otherwise, do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second. All in favor?
Paul, I think you're in charge.
Hold on just a second. 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 Hold on just a second.